Welcome to Testimony Mountain. It's my joy to be here with Veronica Swift, an amazing advocate and blogger on all this kinds of crazy stuff. She's been on here several times, and it's always a joy to have you back, Veronica.
Thank you for having me again. It's delightful to be here. I'm looking forward to whatever we've got going on today.
We've got some good stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to share where people can reach you, how to reach your blog?
Sure. I'm a writer, and I primarily write on my own website, veronicaswift.blog, B as in boy, LOG. There you can find over, 350 articles that I've written in the past 3.5 years, and all on elements of the brotherhood, primarily using primary source whistleblowers who have come out and lived to tell the tale. And I also kind of branch out into other things occasionally, but that's my primary focus at this point because it's the thing to talk about these days. It's the question mark as to why the world is as crazy as it is, and it answers that question, I think, in many different ways. So for me, I think, in the last show that you just produced, you were talking about how people get on you about glorifying this brotherhood, witchcraft, occult stuff. It's not about glorifying it. It is exactly about understanding what it is, because if you don't understand it, it controls you.
Yeah.
But if you understand it, then you can make wiser choices in your life, and you can see things for what they are beneath the surface. Because believe me, what they're telling you in the news or online is it's a surface tale. It's a tale they tell, and it's not the truth. And the truth is underneath, and you have to scratch and hunt and dig underneath the surface to find the truth. And once you do find, what you believe to be the truth, whether it's the whole truth or not, we just don't know at this point. But it has made me so much more calm, because not knowing is so much worse than knowing. I mean, knowing, you do have to go through this period of grieving, because this stuff is really difficult. It's difficult to face. It's difficult to read. It's difficult to understand. It's difficult. It's just, there's no other way to get around it. But once you get through to the other side, it gives you some peace. It gives you some clarity, and it gives you some focus on how you can change your life to maybe not feed into their craziness and perpetuate all this nonsense.
I so agree. And I know a lot of Christians just want to kind of bury their head in the sand and, we just focus on Jesus and all that. But if you don't understand the subtle, very subtle deceptions, it can be very easy to be led astray. And I see a lot of that in this time period of, Christians dipping their toes in some other things and not realizing the origins of it is the brotherhood. And, Paul said, I am fearful for you. I think it was to the Corinthians, lest you be deceived like Eve was.
Yeah.
And, some people think, oh, I'm just going to stick with Jesus and I can't be deceived. Well, if Adam and Eve can be deceived in the middle of perfection, we certainly can, especially when the enemy has had, millennia to so craft his deceptions. And and so it's
thousands of years. We're talking thousands of years to create these signs and symbols and hidden things. So they've had a long time to make this work. It's not like they're just formulating it now, but
yes, it's been around for a long time. And so you've been looking in, in your blogs and some conversations we've had about the kind of the brotherhood lineages and so on, and had a conversation last week with Jesse on that. And we had some people have questions about, well, I kind of want to know about this stuff. Am I connected to Jesus Strand? Am I connected to, all this other stuff? And not knowing how to go about that. And so would you be willing to just share a little bit of your process, what that looks like?
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing you have to do is get yourself a little bit familiar with genealogy. So if you're not at all familiar with it, you can search online and download like a free family tree PDF where it goes back 3 or 4 generations, and just start writing this stuff down on paper. It sounds kind of simple, but it's actually critical. It's crucial to have that information when you go searching in a database of really what I would guess are billions of records. You're going to find individuals, if you start looking, that, there may be 500 or 500,000 people with the same name as the individual you might be looking for.
Mm.
So you've got to start with their full name, if in as much as you know it. You need to have as close to their correct birth date as you can get, month, day, and year, or year will work if you don't have the full thing, but month, day, and year, and their date of death. You can't look up genealogy using living people. It's against the code of ethics
Mhm.
to put living people in a genealogy database. So you can't start with yourself, and you most of the time you can't start if your parents are still alive. You can't start with them, and so most of the time you're looking for grandparents or great grandparents. And so to do that, sometimes if you don't, if that's not something that you've talked about in your family and you don't know their real names beyond grandma, grandpa, or Mima or whatever,
Mhm.
you have to have that information. So the other pieces of information that are important are where they lived, and that can sometimes be a little difficult, especially if they've moved around. But if you're looking at someone, you can also have people who have the same first name, same last name, same birth year, same death year. So how do you distinguish that when you're looking into a database? You need to know kind of where they lived, and knowing the county where they live. Most of us in the United States are not familiar with counties. But once you've been in genealogy for a little while, you understand that counties are critical, because county is the level at which most records are kept. Birth records, death records, land records, leases, deeds, all that kind of stuff is kept at a county level. So you need to know the county, if not the city and the county that they lived in. And then you also have sometimes to deal with townships, which are smaller than counties, but encompass an area that doesn't have a city in it, or a town, or a burg, or anything. Even in small, you have a township. So being aware of those terms is important. And so getting that piece of paper and writing down your parents, both sides, their full names, their birth dates, their death dates, if they've passed, and going back a couple of generations as far as you can get, because that's going to be important to looking in the database. And then choose a database. And there are a lot of databases out there. You can pay to access ancestry.com, and a lot of people do. And you can put your own personal, you can put together your own personal tree on ancestry.com, and sometimes you can connect with other people's trees. Ancestry probably has the most records available of any online database in the world. And so if you're looking to find obscure records, that's the place to go to do it. There are also minor genealogy databases, some of which are free. So if you look up an individual, they'll show you a little mini tree of it online.
Mhm.
But the database that's, I think, the most accessible and the most useful for genealogy, because it's free
Mhm.
completely, you don't have to pay for it. And if you're just beginning and you just want to mess around and you don't know if you want to pay, what is it, $300 a year for Ancestry, or some ridiculous amount? Don't quote me on that, because I don't really know, but I know the last time I looked into it, it was pretty expensive. Worth it for sure if this is something you're going to do long term. But if it's just something you're dipping your toe into, you probably want to start with familysearch.com, which is the Mormon Church's, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints database. And if you followed any of the information that Jessie Zaboter has been going through on Aquarius Rising channel, she's currently talking, I think she's in her fifth, they just did their fifth or sixth video today on the Mormon Church.
Mhm.
And 4 episodes ago, it could have been 4 or 5 episodes ago, she talked about how in the Mormon Church, doing genealogy is considered one of the first elements of temple work, which I would call brotherhood work, right?
Yeah.
So this is a database that you can get into if you need help. There are people you can chat with or message, to kind of help you out. They have videos on how to get you started, on how to work through the interface that they've got, which has been changed quite a bit in the past couple, I'd say 6 months. It's changed again. They change it about every year. which is annoying if you've been in it a long time. but it kind of actually looks like ancestry.com now. So I think they're trying to kind of ease it towards having a similar interface.
Mhm.
And you start with yourself in that database, and you can build off yourself to your parents and your grandparents if you want to do it that way. Or you can just start and search for, this is the way I recommend doing it. You start and search for the individual that's the nearest individual in your ancestry that has passed on either your father or your mother's side. You can choose either one. Doesn't really make a difference. You're going to get two different trees. Once you find that individual, you want to make sure that all the data is right, the birth date, the death date, the places they've lived, the resources, or they call them sources. There's a tab called sources that you can go to. They'll have attached census records. Probably we're up to the 1950 census that's available to the public. So you can look, probably if they were born in the 40s, they'll have the 40s and the 50s census. You make sure that those are correct. And you've got the right person. And then there's a little tab that says tree. And you can press that tab that says tree, and you can muck around going backwards in your ancestry for as far as it will let you go. And basically, you just click around until you find something interesting and you keep going. Now, the trouble with clicking is that to get to these Jesus strand or to these other minor gods, because they've got other minor gods, and quite a lot of them, as we have discovered, in this database. I just pulled up information about, so if you go back to what Jesse talks about, their highest reflection book, Initiates of the Flame. So then you're talking about Order of Melchizedek, Order of the Phoenix, Order of the Golden Dawn, these three high level orders that all the big chief muckety mucks in the Brotherhood supposedly are connected to or running. They use that book, and in that book it lists all of the gods they consider big in the Brotherhood, and this includes Zoroaster, Confucius, Buddha, Krishna, Jesus. He's just one of the guys in this particular book. I actually wrote a post on this. I'd have to click back and find out what the name of it is, but if you look on my website, it's the one with the picture where I've got all those names in the front photograph. Or you can just go to the Initiates of the Flame. It's a free PDF online. You can pull it up and look at it and read all those names. So those are all the minor gods, the lower G gods that are worshipped in the Brotherhood. And they are, many of them, in this family search database. Oh. Which to me, and I've talked about this with quite a few other people, which to me is very odd and weird, because genealogy at the level that I've done it for years is documented. You're supposed to have documents that show that this is absolutely the person and it's absolutely the lineage, and these are absolutely their parents. And whether that's, a birth certificate, death certificate kind of a deal, or going back, whether it's a lineage in a family Bible, those are considered valid for this kind of thing. But 40 generations back, it gets kind of iffy and a little hairy. Do you have the correct people connected as father and mother? And there's a big question mark about that. So so that's kind of that's a long drawn out explanation with a lot of blanks in it about how you might go about finding this out yourself. Now the alternate is if you want me to click back quickly in one of your ancestral lines and see if you have connections to any of these minor G gods, or if they have you connected to the Jesus strand, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, you can send me information about your family tree. You can put together your little family tree and send me the information, and I'll take one of your paternal and maternal lineages, and I'll click back for you and report back. So that's an open offer. And one of the reasons it's an open offer is because of one of the things that Jesse said on the show that you just released this morning, and we're taping this in advance. So this is the show that you released on June 5th, which is if they've got you connected to, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but if they've got you connected to the Jesus strand, then you're in the Brotherhood. And this opens up such a big can of beans. I can't even tell you how big a can of beans it is at this point, because I think it's going to be huge. In fact, In fact, I'll give you a clue about one of the next posts I'm going to write, which is I have looked into the 2 children who were murdered in Delphi, Indiana.
Yes.
And if what Jesse Zaboter says is accurate, that you can determine whether someone is in the brotherhood or not based upon their ancestry, then I can answer that question at this point. And I will also be going to be looking into other people, some of the names who I'll say and some who I won't, but one of the people of interest that I have right now is JonBenet Ramsey.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of question marks about her, and a lot of question marks point to the fact that her family was, and that she was being trafficked, and that part of her circle was her, her family, and that it could have easily been someone in her family who murdered her.
Wow.
So I would find that interesting to know. And there are other children's names that I've got on the short list right now to look into. But if that's a question that you really can't answer with this database, then I think that it's worth delving into that. And conversely, so in order to do this kind of in a scientific way, we have to be also able to say that if you're not in the brotherhood, then you're probably not going to have these in your ancestry. So even if you don't think you're in the brotherhood and you'd like me to click back and check, that's also useful information, because if everybody in the universe checks back to Jesus and Mary Magdalene, then it doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. But there are people I know who do not believe they're in the brotherhood, and that so far they have not been able to click back to any of these. And there are others that I do know are in the brotherhood, and I could have gone for days connecting them to instance after instance after instance after instance. I think I'm up to 18 lines back to Jesus and Mary Magdalene in one lineage that I looked in.
Wow.
Which is a lot, So it could also be a magnitude kind of a deal. With the more you've got, the more likely you are to be in the brotherhood. So there you go. So my contact information is on my blog. There's a contact me link, and it will send me an email, and you can do that. And it may take me a while, depending upon how many people respond to get back to some of that. It does take a while. It takes me a good hour, probably, depending on whether I have. See, the more important thing is whether I have to hunt down your nearest ancestor or not. And with the Delphi children, I had to hunt down their ancestors that I could then start from, and that took me a good hour to do for both of them. Because doing the genealogy of living people is not easy, and so I had to go to a lot of different sources to find. But they're very public. They're very public people. This has been in the news for years, so it wasn't that hard to find enough names for me to go back. And I think I had to get to their great grandparents before I was able to find someone who had passed on, and I could find them in the database.
Wow.
So anyway, there you go.
Very generous of you, Veronica. Appreciate that. And so that is very, very helpful information. I know of several people who will probably be flocking to you for that.
That's okay. I think if this is one way to break open a very hidden aspect of the brotherhood, let's do it.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the Christians who quote the scripture, have nothing to do with the deeds of darkness, can easily use that portion of that scripture to point at me or you or anybody and say, but you're meddling in this. And my answer to that is, you missed the last half of that scripture, which is, but then expose them.
Yes.
And that is what we're doing. You can't expose something that you know nothing about. So first, you do have to learn something about it. You don't have to engage in it. And that's what the scripture is warning us against. I'm not going to be engaging in any of this occult witchcraft, but I am going to be exposing it in as much as I can personally do, because that's what we're called to do, whether it's from a personal testimony point of view, or from an advocate point of view, or from a listener and believer. I mean, even just listening and choosing to believe instead of disbelieve, that's, I think, part of the, it's the first step. It's, it's something you can do instead of dismissing it all and brushing it aside, which a lot of people do. And it just makes it harder and harder to expose it if nobody listens.
Yes, that is so good. So appreciate that. And kind of connected in with all of this, I think that the Brotherhood is so crafty in many, many different ways that they filter some of this false stuff through. And one of those ways is um, what's called starseed, and also this belief of maybe there are angels incarnate in human people. And so just want to take a little bit of time to look at that because it's connected in with this genealogy thing.
Yeah.
We can trace to the fallen angels, but
Yes.
is there some that's good angels in there too? So,
Well, I will say that we've traced back and found some prominent giants in the ancestry. And so I'm going to assume if they're giants that they probably are offspring of fallen angels. So I will confirm that that's pretty prominent in the database at this time, and it's closely connected to the Jesus strand, the Jesus and Mary Magdalene. You find this one particular giant in the realm, like on the page, almost every time you click back and find Jesus and Mary Magdalene connected. So I'll say yes to that. I'll also say that you'll find some of what Jesse would call the men of renown or the titans, the ancient gods, ones that those of us who didn't grow up in the Brotherhood, like myself, would think of more the mythological individuals, Zeus or Hercules or Thor, those kinds of individuals. I found almost all of those in some form or another, also in this database. So once you get to that point, you're like, I'm not so sure this is really correct. So then you have to think, is it a ruse? Are they pulling something over on all of us by connecting some of us back to these individuals that are obviously they can't, you just can't trace their genealogy in modern day. Let's just face it. So if there are people putting these folks in connected in an ancestry, it's got to mean something. Can't mean nothing, but it certainly doesn't mean that you definitely have their blood way back when. I think, is it possible that the bloodlines of the Brotherhood descend from fallen angel lineages? That's certainly possible.
yeah,
I don't think all of us do.
yeah,
But it's possible that there are genetics in there from fallen angels. I just don't necessarily think it's the way that it's portrayed in the databases per se.
yeah. And the question that came up was about unfallen angels, and I would just say I do not believe that that is biblical. I think that I believe very strongly that God created different orders, and there was the angelic order, there was the human order, and there was the animal order, and He's very specific after its kind. He never intended for those different orders to mix. And with Michael Heiser's work, Gary Wayne's, very clearly that was one of the major issues in part of the fall and Genesis 6 and so on, is that that intermingling that is there, which is interesting because scripturally, if I don't know if you've had a chance to look at Gary Wayne's newest book on the Genesis 6 stuff, but tracing how, it says in the end times that it would be as in the days of Noah and as in the days of Lot. And he does a good job of tracing through, those things. And I believe we may be in those time periods where these supposed bloodlines are coming through, whether it's through, the old fashioned way from Genesis 6 or whether it's, DNA manipulation.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Gary or I know I don't have Gary's second book at this point. I'm still struggling through his first book, to be quite honest. But there's so much information in it, and mostly he does a great job of sourcing his information. But I'm pulling the sources at this point. I'm pulling the sources to read the sources because to me, that's a clearer way to get a picture of where he got his ideas from. So I've pulled things like the Grail Kings book of Lawrence Gardner. If you want to read a brotherhood written book, I would, it would stun me if Lawrence Gardner was not a member of the Brotherhood. And that's one of Gary's sources. And Gardner's written quite a few books. He wrote a book on Lord of the Rings kind of thing, and the Grail Kings. And he's got very firm ideas about how Jesus is not much, and all this stuff is a lot more, which is one of the clues. If you're going to read through a book where Jesus is just like, yeah, he's okay, but this is great kind of a deal. So I don't have his next book, but I've never seen anywhere, to try to unsquirrel myself back to your question. I've not seen anywhere that I've ever read or heard in brotherhood theology or otherwise that non-fallen angelics ever inhabited, ever had relations and had human offspring. Like, there's no genetic tracing back to good, quote unquote, angels.
Yes.
I could be wrong, but I've never heard it anywhere. And the only thing I've ever heard is fallen angelic DNA mixing with human DNA.
Yeah, and the book of Enoch is clear. God's judgment against that, was to banish them into the abyss. And so obviously he was not for that.
Right.
So
I think and I say that not towards you, but just kind of this general idea that you can't just make up stuff and have it be true. So even if someone says to you, you've got, angelic DNA, I lean on that heavily with a lot of skepticism.
Yes.
Because we just don't have any evidence that is the case at all for anybody, anywhere, ever.
Yeah. And so that's closely related to, another offshoot of that is the starseed. And some people have even said Jesus was starseed. And, there's all kinds of variations of that as well.
Yeah. Starseed. So I could have this wrong, but my understanding of starseed is an individual who has ascended to a different, and I always get these wrong, dimensions or density. I think it's density. So we're in the third density, third dimension, but there are other dimensions, there are other realms. There's non-corporeal realms where you can live as a spirit being, theoretically. And that would be what we generally call heaven or hell. In both places, there are individuals, entities living as spirit beings, but they don't have three-dimensional physical bodies. And so the starseed, as I've seen it, is someone who has been through an incarnation as a third-dimensional physical being, and who has then gone on to a new life, reincarnated as a spirit being, or detached from their physical body, and their physical body died, and their spirit went on to live in a different dimension, whether that's fourth or fifth or sixth. I've heard seventh dimension as well. And they decided that Earth was in such a bad shape as this fourth, fifth, or sixth or seventh dimensional spirit being that they wanted to come back and help. They wanted to come back and help out. And so they made a contract with God, and they came back and were, quote unquote, reincarnated into a human body as a person who's generally different from other individuals on planet Earth, has a deep desire to help clean up this earthly mess and help us all not, annihilate ourselves with nuclear war or whatnot. I have a lot of mixed feelings about that whole idea. I've heard a number of people I consider fairly reputable talk about starseeds extensively, and claim to work with starseeds and help them out in doing whatever quote unquote work they're doing. I don't really think, for me or necessarily many other people, it's something to worry about or to get too invested or interested in. I mean, if you're here to do work, you're here to do work no matter where you came from or why you believe you came from wherever you came from. So I think the basic idea for me is the primary objective while you're on Earth is to keep yourself out of out from under the umbrella of evil, and under the umbrella of God, doing God's work. So connecting with God is of paramount importance. Making sure you have open lines of communication is of paramount importance, and making sure that you're listening to and doing what you're supposed to be doing in this lifetime, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Whether that's, whether that's doing what you're doing, you've gone through these horrific experiences, you've managed to claw your way out of it. That's the way I always see it, as people digging and clawing their way up the side of a very big hole they've been thrown in, trying to reach the light at the top of that hole and get out, and then reach down and help other people who are also attempting to get out of it. Or whether it's like me, you're desperately trying to understand this so that it helps someone who is trying to dig themselves out get even a bit of information that they might need to then make their life easier and make their journey a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So.
And so for me, the first memories that began surfacing for me had to do with off-planet stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that is probably where I hear most about the star seed is, I've heard it more from, they're from another planetary system or whatever. And,
Yeah.
like you said, had compassion and decided to incarnate a human body and so on and on and on.
Yeah.
And, that was appealing to begin to look at. And I read some people's accounts and their books and so on. And, like you said, there's some reputable people who follow along with that. But as I went further on in my journey and a deeper level of things were exposed, and, particularly I appreciate what Jesse brings, is to understand that that can just be programming. And
Right.
so I really honor the people who have those experiences and not here to criticize and go, that's dumb or whatever, because to you, it might have been real. Those are maybe real memories of being on another planet. I had memories of being on another planet,
Yeah.
and so I totally understand how that can be. But I personally believe that's part of the, brotherhood deception, is to get all of these, it goes along with their theme of all these other races and planets and other, things going on,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just the simple, God created this class of being,
Right.
and animals, and we're meant to stay within those orders.
Yeah.
And that Jesus is the only savior. And he did a really good job of it. And I don't believe he needs help from outside people from other planets to help him. Um, I do believe as humanity, we can participate in that with him, but it's guided and directed by him. It's not because there's a bunch of star seeds that have come, to help us out.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't, I'm always willing to look at the odd stuff, because sometimes the odd stuff is where the truth lies, or nuggets of truth lie.
Mhm.
So it could very well be that the programming that, again, they've had hundreds, if not thousands, of years to figure out and fix, definitely did kind of UFO, off-world, other race, alien manifestations during that programming, so that they could get the scientific minded or the left brain people to really believe that. There are some people who actually believe, though, that if you clear up the junk, the chemicals, the calcifications kind of in your body, that you will actually start to see, and you'll actually start to see other races on planet Earth. In fact, there's one person that I followed for a while who said he can't really watch anything that has to do with Congress, the U.S. Congress, because he sees them all as alien creatures. And I thought, well, I have to say that sounds like something that I could appreciate, because they act like they're alien monsters. They do, a lot of them. But, whether that's true, I haven't ever experienced anything like that. I know some people have, and whether it's programming or whether it's real, who knows? I don't know. That, there's so many different things that I think as humans we don't know about, and I don't think everything is taught in the Bible. I think there's so much more that we don't understand. I'm always willing to have an open mind and say, well, it could be, it might be. I don't have evidence of that at this point personally, and I think that if you're willing to go that way, and it's an easy answer for you and you're in the brotherhood, then you're probably escaping the more difficult answer that's probably closer to the truth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's something to think about. If you've got that makes so much sense, I don't have to, have to worry about anything, then you're probably headed the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and again, I get it because I've had some memories like that in in a ritual that I was in with Prince Philip is, in the memory, he, went in and out of being human and reptilian,
Yeah, right.
and whether that was shape shifting, whether that was programming, you know, whether I was seeing him as he really is, I don't fully know. Um, but I think we can give these to the Lord, and we can trust that the Lord will guide us on these things, and that the Bible is a foundation. Yeah, it doesn't have
Yeah,
everything, but I believe that we do see keys, and that's what I really appreciate about Gary Wayne's work and Michael Heiser and stuff is that them bringing an understanding of the incursion of the fallen angels into humanity and how that has distorted things and why things like the flood and why Sodom and Gomorrah and things like this and the Israelites you know doing away with the Canaanites who
yeah,
were largely Nephilim or inbreeded in with them
yeah,
as God's mercy to do what he could to keep a pure bloodline. I don't think any
right.
bloodline is pure.
Yeah, at this point, I don't think so either. I do think, though, that there are higher percentages of fallen angelic or Nephilim or other crazy stuff that we probably don't know about. Um, the and then you've got the additional problem of how many of these really high up people have created contracts with spirit beings to allow them to take over there. So are these, and we've heard not only from you, but from Jeanette Archer and other individuals that they have also seen the Queen and Prince Philip in a reptilian form, the Queen Mother as well. So is this a generational, a familial spirit contract that they've made? And so during rituals or whatnot, the spirit being takes over and shapeshifts their bodies. And that's certainly 100% a possibility as well. I've got that kind of an instance mirrored a number of times within the Brotherhood and the werewolf lineages and other places. And they say that is what's going to happen with the Antichrist. The Antichrist is supposed to be of a lineage of, I would guess, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, although Gary Wayne says that he wouldn't be surprised if it comes out of the Scottish Stuart lineages, but those are also highly Jesus and Mary Magdalene. If you look at the lines, they come down and suddenly they hop into either Ireland or, or Wales or Scotland, and they connect with Egyptian
Mhm.
lines and so some of these things that they've got listed in these databases are really wild, but it gives you a clue of what lineages are kind of important to them and why Wayne does say he thinks that he wouldn't be surprised at all if the Antichrist lineages were out of the Scottish, um, the Scottish Stuart lineages. So the kingship lineage of Scotland, but those Stuart lineages came directly back uh, through the Grail lineages and the
Mhm.
Grail kings, which go back to the French kings, which go back to the Merovingian and the Sicambrian Frankish kings, and which go straight back to Jesus and Mary Magdalene in the databases. So, um, yeah, so that's kind of, I took a turn there, but uh, the the possibility of there being some and the Jesus and Mary Magdalene thing, the Jesus strand, the way it's listed in some of these listings is that Jesus was a high priest and Mary Magdalene was a high priestess, right? So very brotherhood terminology, and they were only able to have relations once every 4 years, which was why they didn't have many kids, and they were prohibited except in December. And I mean, there's so much of this sort of crazy nonsense. And you get the distinct sense if you go back in the line from Mary Magdalene, especially that it hits the line of Adam and Lilith.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lilith, also known as Jezebel, also known as Queen of Heaven, Queen of the Dead. She's got about 900 different names. She's the statue that is called Mary in the Catholic Church. She is she's got a lot of forms and that she comes from. So technically, if you're talking the lineage of the Antichrist, it could actually go back to that son of Cain kind of idea, except in this case, it's son of Lilith or daughter of Lilith, and Lilith was supposedly the dragon queen lineage. So again, you're talking about, for lack of a better term, extraterrestrials or not, fallen angelic or whatever kind of DNA that is. So you're looking at an antichrist that I am sure they're going to try to get fallen angelic DNA into. And the higher ups in the brotherhood, they're going to try to make sure that they have fallen angelic DNA as well, if possible.
Yeah.
And along with that, maybe an easier time, although I don't know this, I haven't heard this, but just kind of guessing on the fly, maybe an easier time of connecting to the spirit world or inviting changeling spirits or other shape-shifting spirits to come into their body. That's a guess, but kind of connecting these things together, piecing them together. It's kind of why I have to write one post on one thing, let my mind sort of absorb it, and then write another post, because eventually they do all connect together, but they feel in the beginning like separate ideas, kind of in a way I guess you would feel like when memories start surfacing, they feel separate. You feel like,
Yeah.
what? What does this have to do with anything? Is this real? Where'd that come from?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the deception and the trickery that is so involved in it. And, they just change names of different groups and different things to perpetuate, what they're doing and keep it hidden. And it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I downloaded an interesting chart, genealogical chart of the Frankish kings, which if you look in the middle of this series of Frankish kings, it has the king that's supposedly the daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, whose name in the databases is Sarah Tamar, Tamar. Gary Wayne took me forever to find her in his book, because he doesn't call her Sarah Tamar, he calls her Tamar, I believe, or just doesn't call her a name at all. I thought initially when I wrote the Jesus Strand article that he didn't have her at all in there, but you kind of have to hunt, because he changes some of the names and some of the spellings in his book from the original resources that he gets things from. So it could be a little bit to kind of trace it through. But yeah, Sarah Tamar supposedly married Antenor V, one of the Frankish kings. If you look on this genealogy chart, though, that I pulled offline, a lot of the individuals in that chart above them in this very faint gray print say fictional person, fictional person, fictional person. And if you compare that chart against the lineages of kings, I was talking to Thorny about this. I'm like, once you hit this first individual's name, you're like, yep, I'm on the trail, because it goes backwards through this lineage of Cambrian kings of the area of France before it was called France. That's why they're called Frankish kings. It goes back, but it kind of follows that genealogy, but not quite. And some of the numbers are changed, and then it skips a generation here, and you're like, yeah, they're close, but yeah, once you are putting quote unquote fictional people into a genealogy database, then you have to get a question mark.
but again, it matters to them, and
right.
that's kind of the intriguing part of it. So.
Yeah, so you can say they're not after the whole truth, but they're after a truth for them. What their truth is, or what they have built up to be the truth, is what we're trying to dig out. What is this that is their truth? Why does this database exist then? It is not about the truth. It's not about the genealogy of people back to essentially Adam and Eve and God, because they put God in this database as well. There are many, many different gods that spelled God, that are the parents plural of Adam and Eve. So that's just, it's interesting. What is their truth? So we got to dig around and find out what they're getting at and what they believe and why they believe it. And then maybe we'll have a chance of making some sense out of it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is the adoption and switching families in and out. And
Yeah.
so, even for me, most likely a petri dish baby. So, in some ways, my actual um, biological lineage of my adopted parents, you know, may or may not be significant, although they do put you in a family with a similar lineage.
Yeah, I think that's so rampant in the brotherhood that you actually can't count on any genealogy being a genetic lineage. You're talking about a familial lineage, a family line instead of a genetic family lineage. So genetic genealogy and actual genealogy are really they're two different balls of wax, but they're totally different things when it comes to the brotherhood. So yeah,
Yeah,
even in the Kings, like you go back that far in the Kings, and you can't really say for sure that these kings were having relations with the queens,
yeah,
because those were often very formal relationships, and their actual physical relationships were often with mistresses or the ladies in waiting of the queen, or some
mhm,
relation of the family, instead of that. So yeah, we're not talking actual genealogy in terms of genetics. I don't think that's represented in this database at all. So that's what we would think of genealogy being, though. In the modern day, you really want to find the actual genetic parents of someone, because that gives you their heritage, their lineage. Yeah, so the brotherhood, their genealogy database is talking about something different.
yeah. And even the DNA groupings, 23andMe and others like that, I don't know how accurate those are either, just because they are most likely controlled and run by the Brotherhood.
All
So,
of them, every last one of them. If you willingly give your DNA to 23andMe or Ancestry.com or any of the other genetic lineage databases, you've just entered into a contract that you have no idea what they can do with it.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
And years ago, before I knew anything about that, my parents signed me up for
mhm.
23andMe, and so I've had to work through that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. It's doubly hard, because now you can actually find out if you are genetically related to your parents. I watched a video a while back of a woman who did that for herself, not knowing that she was adopted at all. She just thought she was going to maybe find an interesting cousin or whatnot. And since she found like somewhere between 20 and 40 half siblings, because turns out they had gotten the sperm from a sperm bank. And so she had many siblings, because this sperm was apparently widely used.
just
So that rocked her world big time.
yes,
Changed changed a lot for her. Luckily, she loved her parents. Her parents were very supportive, but these kinds of things can also take a toll on you and not go the way you think they're going to go. So
yes,
yeah, they're and then again, they're very useful if you're really searching for a needle in a haystack and you want to find a genetic relative. They can be incredibly useful and pinpoint that with an accuracy that you can't find anywhere else. But it's definitely not what the Brotherhood's after. Not with the adoptions, not with the genetic manipulation that they do, which I think has not been revealed in its fullest yet at all, and maybe never will be. I don't know, but I think the things that they are able to do with genetic manipulation far outstrip our even wildest imaginations at this point. So I would imagine that some of the well, so for example, Elon Musk, some of the rumors going around about him are that his mother had relations with a fallen angelic, and so he's part fallen angel DNA. And there's other individuals who they think that he was just genetically engineered,
mhm,
maybe no actual relations, but he has got a mixture of DNA from some data bank that they have, under Mount Herman in the Genesis 6 project, or something like
yeah,
that. So it very well could be that a number of elite individuals are not genetically related to their family at
mhm,
all. And they're
yeah,
just placed in a family because they have to grow up somewhere.
yeah. And it was interesting in Svali's book, her newest one, her autobiography. She talks about how in the Jesuit order, they, everybody's born at the same time of the year, the way they
Mm,
do their, petri dish, if I understood it correctly. And it was just kind of
right.
interesting because January 6th is the day that they do all that. And my mom's birthday is January 5th, and my
Yeah,
birthday is January 10th, but I've never felt like that was my actual birthday.
yeah.
And so, a lot of stuff I still don't
That's
know. I
interesting.
may
Yeah.
not be for sure, but and then, my dad's birthday is in December, and so is my husband's, which again, they're gonna flex dates because if, a whole group of people had exactly the same birth date, you could start tracing things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, anyway, who knows? I don't know on that for sure, but it's just kinda interesting what different groups do and how they do it and, you know.
Yeah, definitely interesting. I haven't had a chance to read her book yet, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. She's always got incredible revelations and
Yeah.
bombshells, really,
Yes.
that are mind blowing, but also very useful in connecting a lot of dots. If
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, she was also the one that has said that, in addition with other whistleblowers, saying that the general technology that is available to the Brotherhood is, I forget if it's 60, I think somebody mentioned 75 years ahead of where we are now. In fact, I think it was her, she said at one point that they, as an infant, and this is, be careful, this is hard to hear, but that she was disobedient as an infant and they hung her from her arms and dislocated both of her shoulders.
Mhm.
And then put, to heal her, they put her in, I think it was different colored lights and in a bath of certain kinds of electrolyte solutions, etc. They've got ways of healing from these horrific tortures that they do to people, um, in a technological kind of a way that we just don't have available to us.
Yes, definitely. I've heard that over and over, and, it makes sense to me. I believe even with AI that, it's like the big thing now, but I believe it's been used, and abused with survivors for years, years and years and years,
Yeah.
and so it's not a new thing, and this is just my sense, and I could be completely wrong, but including that, the the way that they are currently using it, is enabled by, I don't wanna say parts of survivors, but, some of our energy, or essence. I don't know how to quite describe it, but for how realistic the AI is and functions and so on, and, the crazy movies that, Netflix put out, like Her, where the guy falls in love with, the AI and all of this kind
Mm,
of
yeah.
stuff. It's just more horrificness of the brotherhood.
Yeah. Well, I think we're coming up on some of that too being released to the public. Like we've had the medbed thing,
Mhm.
um, flash and introduced in bits and pieces for what, a good year now,
Yeah.
maybe a little longer. That's been bits and pieces of that all over the place. So I think they're planning on releasing some things, but I have no doubt that it's not going to be for healing of humanity. It's going to be another COVID-esque kind of. We really prefer to kill you, but
Yeah.
we'll make it sound like we're actually going to heal you instead. So I'm very wary of all that stuff.
I am too, and I just want to encourage people. It can be so tempting, a whole lot of this stuff, because, to save a life or improve life and all of these kinds of things. But I believe it's tricks. They've been doing it to us for years. Even the simple things of plastic and microwave ovens that are supposed to save all this time, um, but
Did you
ultimately are destroying us.
did you hear about the crap they've embedded in Band-Aids?
No.
Okay, so they've embedded some. I can't remember if it's PFOS or some kind of polyvinyl chloride kind of a deal. But they've embedded some chemical in Band-Aids that actually impedes healing. So even if it's just as simple as that, they've gotten us hooked on this idea, on these consumer items, even as
Yeah.
simple as a flippin' Band-Aid,
Wow.
that now, instead of being an aid to healing, is preventing you from healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just crazy. So, be in the world, but not of the world, almost at this point means stop the excessive consumerizing and do something different, because they're all out crazy to make everything be human destructive. And when you flip that and think about it, it's a powerful statement, because if humans are that powerful, if we are that powerful, and they need to go to such measures as to embed chemicals and band-aids to help get rid of us, that we've got more power and they've got less power than
Yes.
overall. So again, all of this is just for information and empowerment, because we are strong enough and we are important enough for them to want us gone, which means we've got something that can wipe them out or disintegrate their ideas faster than they can put it together. They may have
Yes.
had thousands of years, but they could easily, if we all got on the same page, be wiped out in a very short amount of time. And I mean their plans be wiped out and disintegrated. And I'm not talking
Yes.
about them per se, but what they're planning to do.
That is so good. And that's what maybe we'll wrap it up there. Is I just want to leave people with hope, is that the reason we're exposing these things is to shine the light on where the real power is, and
Mm-hmm.
the true blood of Jesus that is for everyone, not just for a bloodline, to save us all. And that is the good news. That is the hope that we have. And
Yeah.
so that's where we get to rest.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Very
thank you so
cool.
much, Veronica. So appreciate you being on today.
Thank you
And,
for having me again. It's always a delight.
and we'll look forward to next time on Testimony Mount.